if you love it, you'll work on it, you'll continue to work on it until, it's something that you can enjoy and know that it'll last a while.
Hey everyone, I'm Chase, founder of Okanosker. Welcome to the next episode of The Watch Table. We're here today at the Okanosker HQ to chat with Gabe about his watches and why he loves them. Gabe is a local Chicago watch lover, an engineer, and an all-around great guy. He has a true passion for all things vintage, from watches to cars, and finds himself tinkering on both when he's not with his family. Let's learn more about the story behind the watch. Gabe, welcome to The Watch Table.
Thanks for having me.
So, why do you love watches?
I guess it really just comes down to the engineering, the mechanics behind them, not only the aesthetics, because I like pretty things, but I appreciate all the engineering and the design that went into making something like this happen.
Your first grail piece, that piece that you hunted after, and tell me more about the story of your Speedy.
This guy right here. So really liked iconic pieces, right? So, but when you look at Omega, something that really speaks to a lot of people, the Speedmaster is right up there with it.
Absolutely.
And coming out of college, like I said, I had a little bit of discretionary income, but I was just starting off my engineering career. So when I was aspiring to, get a good piece, this was definitely on there. And I tried many a Speedy, but they were always just so big. Mm-hmm. And a lot of, I'll say, relatively modern pieces were 10, 15 years ago, were bigger than they are now. The thing with vintage pieces is they come with a lot of strings sometimes. Sometimes they don't work all the time. Sometimes, especially when you're importing them from overseas, there's duty fees.
Sure.
So once I got the piece, it didn't work. And I was like, oh, it's an Omega piece. There's an Omega boutique in Oak Brook.
Sure.
I was like, hey, let's go take it in.
Take it to the dealer.
Took it to the dealer, and they said, yeah, we can send it to the service center in New York, and if they can fix it, we will get a quote and an estimate, and we'll send it your way. Fast forward 2 weeks later, they send me an estimate, and they said, yep, we can service the piece. It'll be ready in 4 to 6 weeks, and we'll mail it back to you. A couple weeks went by. I think it was the sales rep was the one that contacted me and told me that there was a snag. And they said, we can't warranty the piece because the dial and the hands are water damaged. And I said, okay, so what does that mean? And they said, well, we can replace the dial and the hands, and then we can warranty the piece. And they only charged me like $100. So I said, all right, have at it. Have since learned that was almost kind of taboo now, and you deal with it. But the worst part about it is I ended up selling that dial and that hands like a couple weeks after I got the watch back, because I thought I could offset the price of the service. Finding that good watchmaker goes a long way.
Absolutely.
Somebody that's trustworthy. So good mechanic, good tailor, good watchmaker.
Yeah.
Goes hand in hand.
But so going to smaller sized watches, like one of your very first bigger watch purchases, if you will, not that the Speedy reduced plus the cost of it behind them, all of that wasn't big enough, but for example, the Rolex Date, which I believe is a 34 millimeter piece.
34 millimeters. So I was on vacation in Vegas. All good stories start off, you're in Vegas, right? So
it's not the first time I've heard a watch story starting off in vacation in Vegas.
As an engineer, grunted it out for a couple of years at the nuke sites that I worked at, and I just become a manager. And so we're out, it's Vegas, I'm at the Caesar shop.
Doing a little drinking.
Little day drinking. I said, let's do a little window shopping. My wife said, okay. We went to the window, I saw all the Rolex on there, and talk about iconic pieces, right? So the Datejust, the Submariner, Rolex has many of them, just like the Omega did. But I said, all right, well, let's just go in. Let me try on a couple pieces. I'm not going to buy anything. Obviously, that didn't happen. But we went in, extremely nice staff at Hyde Park Jewelers. The sales rep was very helpful in trying to sell me that watch. Didn't buy it initially. I looked at it, I tried it on, and the relatively modern Rolex Datejust, the 36, because of the wide lugs, just sat a little bit bigger on my wrist.
Fits very differently.
Yeah, it fits differently than the vintage pieces. So I would definitely go for a vintage Datejust now, like a 1601 would definitely be on my wrist right now.
It even brings us to the story about your Okanosker Jackson. We first met God, maybe it was like three some odd years ago, when you came to do the HSNY class. The very first class that we held, literally a week or two after we moved into this spot. You came in, you were sitting in the very front corner. I'm like, man, this guy is like a happy guy. He's excited to be here. And we just chatted there, no big deal. You actually won one of our wallets. We did a giveaway,
Still have it.
which is great.
Yep.
And then I don't think I heard from you again until we met up at a Alliance Francaise event with a guest speaker of
Well known now.
very well known now, Gary Steingart. We just chatted. I know you were chatting with John, and you got to see the Jackson in person, and I'm pretty sure you fell in love with it then.
My eye caught John's wrist, and I was like, you had just released the Jackson. I was like, well, let me take a look at it. And John was like, here. He took it right off his wrist, and he let me wear it. And it took all of 10, 15 minutes to really think about it's Jackson, right? Namesake of my nephew.
Yep.
We talked about the connection, but we talked about sometimes you look at these legacy type pieces and you're like, well, what's going to live on after you?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, one, it'd be great to get him a piece that I think, one, represents a good bond between uncle and nephew, and then two, it's namesake. You can't get any better than that. And it's a great piece to have. I love the navy. I love orange. Pretty much all of my schools, those have been my school colors. So I wasn't gonna go without getting a blue Jackson.
Yep.
And the fact that, like I said, I got to see it in person just kind of sealed the deal for me.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you've been also involved with a lot of the things that we do here.
Yep.
For example, you were such a great big help in the annual owner center that we do. Just also with some of your recommendations, but then literally helping the guy carry this big propane stove up to our deck so he could make tacos for everybody. And you're like, fuck yeah, let's do it. And just no questions. And I love the fact of how much you've become like just a really good big part of not only the Chicago watch scene, but also like close to Oak and Oscar brand, and something that really means a lot. And I love the fact that the Jackson that you have will go on to a family member. That to me is one of the coolest parts about that story.
Yeah, I think the big thing is the watch community in general. It's a close community, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people are not only generous of their time, but of their resources. And like I said, this will go on to him, provided he ends up being a stand-up guy, because I can't give it away to a jerk or a brat. But right now, my nephew is, the best kid. Love him to death. And so I'm pretty sure it'll end up on his wrist in about 18 years or so when he graduates.
I love it. Let's talk about those UGs, because the very first UG that you got was the pole router. Yep. This guy here, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And
Pole router date.
Which is a great piece. I do love it. It's a great design. I think the value of these guys have just shot up over the past couple of years. But the conversation of the pole router, you kind of almost have to lead into this big eye uni compacts with a 12-hour bezel that is a little pet project of yours.
Yes. So remember how we talked about certain things are passions, and then some can become obsession. So it's like a very fine line. It's a very fine line. So I have many a UG, and I have many a UG part, dial, hands, in boxes at my house near my bench. The pole routers all started this obsession. And since I could not afford a big eye, because like you mentioned, the prices on UG have continued to skyrocket.
And the big eye is just a phenomenal watch.
It's a phenomenal piece. And so when I first saw a couple of these dials go up on Chrono 24, I knew I had to have one. Now I knew I wouldn't ever get the watch itself.
Just wanted the dial.
I just wanted the dial, and the dial sat for a couple of months until certain things started popping up, like UG cases. So this is a UG signed case. It wasn't meant for the big eye, but it's a UG stamped case on the inside. The movement I had sourced from a guy overseas. It's a Valjoux 23 movement. It's not UG stamped, but as I started putting this watch together, I realized, two things. One, I am obsessed with UG. It takes up more than half of my collection. But then the big thing is, that class, that HSNY class, sparked an interest, and it's one that's continued to go forward, right? So it started off with, a $10 set of screwdrivers, some brass tweezers, and it has since moved up to like cleaning machines, crystal presses, dyes, brooches. There's a lot of tools now in the house.
What was it about the Rolex being your one watch that
My
you're
one and only watch, and then it's turned into many. And actually, there's so many more project watches that I have.
Yeah, you
And-
told me 4 or so more big eye type UG projects.
And there's probably a tank or two in there. in
just
the
a
mix.
couple things.
Just a couple things on the burner. But like I said, I really love this piece because not only a Panda dial, but the big eye, it's rugged in that the case is nice, thick, it's sharp. And some of these I will actually work on.
And that's a big argument within the community of whether you should be a purist or whether it can be stock parts, signed parts, all like kind of put together into a Frankenwatch.
Yeah, but you got to be transparent about it.
Oh, of course.
So that's the thing. It's like I'm upfront with like all my pieces. If I do ever trade, or sell pieces, I've sold some UG
Absolutely.
pieces, and to the local Red Bar community here in Chicago, great people. Anything I sell to them, fully transparent on what's original, what's a replacement. All my stuff is usually new old stock replacement parts, and when it's serviced, they know that they're getting at least a year guarantee because that's what I want to do. But like you said, you got to just be transparent about it. So I by no means have any qualms with telling somebody that this isn't a legit piece.
Of course, yeah. And that's something you've been able to do over the past 2 years. You've actually found a couple local watchmakers that you've probably had to beg a little bit to let you do this, but they'll let you in the shop, they'll give you some tools and tinker and teach and show you what to do. To the point now where you talked about that at your house, you actually have kind of a quasi watch shop
Yeah, like,
where,
let's
where
have
you
one-
work on stuff.
Yeah, and the thing is, with these pieces, some of them are obviously very complicated, some are not. But once you gain, I guess confidence is a little bit of a problem because it can go one of two ways.
Get you in trouble or?
Get you in trouble, and a mistake on these pieces tends to not be cheap. But there's a couple of things that you just gotta admire about these things. And when you look at, that movement, it's hard not to appreciate everything that went into it. Now, I have serviced a Universal Genève movement. I serviced the 215-2 that's in this watch. But all the different variations that Universal Genève came out with are just impressive. And like I said, the finishing on that is on par with any big watch brand out there. Patek, Rolex, IWC, the finishing was impeccable. And the engineering was unbelievable. To think that you can go from a centralized rotor to a decentralized rotor and make it that small, it's just impressive.
Well, I mean, Geneva stripes, bevel's edge. It's
perfect.
28 jewels. I mean, it's a great movement.
Yeah, so I love it, and I love everything that's in every one of these pieces. This movement is also in this watch, which, we talked about the community, right? The vintage community, especially the Universal Genève, the UG community, we're fanboys, and we're fanboys for a reason. Some stuff is just not available anymore, or it's extremely hard to get. So on this pole router sub, this crystal, I helped design with another one of the fanboys out there. He's in Hong Kong. I sent him a service dial, and I sent them a UG signed crystal. And from there, he was able to create a design, and we just worked on it, and he sent me this prototype, and it fits like a glove. And it's just one of those things where it's like, if you love it, you'll work on it, you'll continue to work on it until, it's something that you can enjoy and know that it'll last a while.
And that translates into more for you than just watches. For example, Fiat.
Right.
You have a 1980 Fiat Spider 2000, right?
Correct.
Which is a car that you just love. It's your Sunday driver,
Yep.
mostly original. It's a survivor, if you will.
It is.
I think you had said that it has new tires and a radio.
Yep.
But then otherwise, it's pretty good.
It's pretty much all there. And it actually was in my wife and I's wedding.
Oh, that's cool.
It's the car that we drove off into the
I love
I wouldn't
that.
say the sunset. It was a starry night.
Yeah.
But love that car. I think it has so many similarities to the vintage watch scene.
Yep.
It's finicky at times.
Oh, yeah.
Works when it wants to, but it is a survivor car. And when I picked it up, it had like 34,000 miles on
Oh,
there.
wow.
1980.
That's low.
The paint is, I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's all there.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
I know it's funny, you talk about vintage cars, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Like my 95 Classic Range Rover, long wheelbase, it starts when it wants to.
Exactly.
And
Too cool.
I'll
Not
tell
gonna
you,
happen.
and I'll tell you, the paint is not perfect, but it's that patina we love, right?
Yeah, You can look at you'll see you'll look at my car and you'll look at the hood of that car. That hood is sun faded. Some of the pinstriping completely faded
Yep.
off. But I just love the look because it's well, I'll say it's character. It's
character.
patina.
It's patina.
Yeah.
It's damage, but it's damage we can appreciate.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I love that. So I think that brings us to our rapid fire questions.
All right, I'm ready. Shoot.
Ready? All right.
Yep.
First question, if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Super speed.
Okay. What's your favorite complication?
Chronograph.
All right. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I don't think I'd ever leave Chicago. Born and bred. Yep.
All right.
Sticking.
All right. So who'd win in a fight? Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos?
I'm gonna put my money on Musk. There's just the right amount of crazy there to take it over the top. Yeah, that'll work. Yeah, 5 on Musk.
Yeah. Last question. How many spring bars are in the bottle?
Oh man. Let's go with 256. 256.
All right. 256.
Yep.
Well, with that, I say thank you very much for coming to the watch table.
My pleasure.
Cheers.